Hello, it's so nice to see you again. I hope you enjoyed our class yesterday on how we can connect with plants as medicine in general. And today I want to go a little bit deeper into how we can use tea as medicine. And I want to talk about this because there are so many different types of tea out there. To think that we're using them all in the same way would be silly. That is definitely not how to use tea. As I mentioned in our first video this week, tea was one of the first Chinese medicinal herbs. And so back in the day, there were doctors who only used tea to treat all ailments. But it would be different types of tea and different processing of tea. So in that, you can see actually we can use tea in many different ways. We just need to know a little bit more about it. And that's a question I get asked all the time. What tea should I drink? And a lot of times it depends. There's definitely teas that are better for beginners and teas that have stronger cheese and teas that maybe you should drink during certain times and not. And so I'll talk a little bit about that today. But in general, we want to work with the energies of the tea and the energies of our body to bring ourselves into balance. So if you've ever been to a tea ceremony with me, and actually it's probably if you're closer to me and we're there before the tea ceremony started, because usually it's come to me in itself. But sometimes when someone comes over for tea, I might just double check with them, hey, how are you feeling? And depending on how they're feeling, I will choose a tea that fits that. So for example, if someone came in and they were saying, I am feeling so amped up. This is Gracie, everyone. She doesn't let me close doors. So she's a staple in all my videos. But yeah, if someone was coming in and they were like, I'm so amped up, and I was gonna serve a tea. Gracie, no. And I was gonna serve a tea that was very activating, I might be like, ooh, that's not right. Let me serve something else. Let me serve something that's more calming. And same vice versa. Or if there's a tea that's like a very sleepy, like sleep inducing, I'm not gonna serve that during a morning ceremony. People have to go about their day, and it actually does impact people. I've had that happen where I've been served like an evening sleepy tea in the middle of the day. And while it made me feel really calm in the moment and it was nice in the moment, afterwards I was like, I have work to do. How am I going to do it now? So similar to the principles in Ayurveda, which are like attracts like and opposites balance here. So we want to understand, how do I feel in myself, and then what tea is going to bring me into balance. So the tea, when we use it as medicine, is actually used to what's the word? I'm not thinking of the right word. It's here to balance out whatever the imbalance is. I was thinking of a fancier word, but that's what it is. So that's the key when we're thinking about any medicines, but that's how we can think of different teas as well. So there's a bunch of different types of tea. And the first thing I want to just say is it's really important to be drinking organic or wild teas. The reason I say this is because the tea trade is not a great one. When it comes to pesticides and things like that, it's really not the best industry. And I can explain why. Essentially, we create all of these pesticides here in the US, and eventually they get outlawed. Then they get shipped to China and they go into the food production in China. And then they get outlawed in China. And so they go into the tea production, because tea in their standards isn't considered a food product. So really, the pesticides that are coming in these beautiful teas a lot of the time are like the worst of the worst of the worst. And so for yourself, please drink organic tea. And just whatever it is, even if that's the only thing, that's a really great place to start. And when we think about drinking teas that are wild, that, as I mentioned in the first videos, that aren't coming from those plantations that are pesticide laden and that have no roots and things like that. But when we think of tea in its natural environment and we're drinking that type, it's just going to work with our systems better. It's the same thing as here in this country, we have this a lot with gluten intolerance. People can't eat bread, but then when they go to Europe, they can eat bread all they want. Or if they're eating like a nice naturally fermented sourdough, it's going to work with them a lot better. And that's because it's a better ingredient. It's heirloom grains. It hasn't been so modified. And it's the same thing with tea. So we want to get the best quality tea we can in order to have this really nice medicine running through our system and an easy integration. That's the answer for a lot of people who are really sensitive to caffeine. A lot of times, yes, you're sensitive to caffeine. You might be sensitive to the more activating teas, even if they're beautiful teas. I'm like that. But when it comes to just drinking like a black tea for a black tea or a red tea for a red tea, actually that makes a big difference, that it's organic or it's coming from a wild source or it's a living tea. So that's the first thing I'll say for drinking tea as medicine. You don't want your medicine full of pesticides, right? You just don't. And then I'm going to just go through some of the different types of tea. And in that I'll tell you like what they're generally good for. So if you're just looking generally speaking, this is not a rule for all of them, but what you're looking for generally and how it might impact you. So the first thing I want to start is with red tea. And here I need to just clarify a little historical error that we've made. Here in the West, you hear black tea all the time, right? And that was something that was the name was given by the British. And black tea in the West is actually called red tea in China. And you'll see it. If you look at the color of the tea, it's red. So whenever I'm talking about red tea, I'm actually talking about black tea in the West. And in China, black tea is a completely different thing. And it looks black when you brew it. So that's a really important distinction because we want to we want to honor what the teas actually are and the culture that has cultivated this practice for so long. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is red tea. And again, what you might think of as black tea is actually red tea. And red teas tend to be more activating. They are great teas to drink in the morning. You might have already experienced this if you've drank any sort of black tea, red tea. And so for me, I'm going to drink red teas in the morning. They help balance me out when I wake up. And actually, that's a little bit of a lie. I don't drink a lot of red tea because I wake up really energized. But in the mornings when I don't, they're really great. Or maybe I need an afternoon pick-me-up, I'm going to drink a red tea. That being said, and it's actually funny because for me, if I drink red tea in the morning, oftentimes it'll actually spin me out because I already have energy. It's that like attracts like. And then I'm just more energized than I need to be. So for me to be brought into balance, I don't tend to drink red teas, but a lot of people do in the mornings. It's actually kind of funny because my ex-boyfriend and I would always be in this argument every morning. I was like, I'm awake. Let's drink a nice grounding tea. And he'd be like, I can't wake up. I need a red tea. And so we had the exact opposite needs in the morning. And I would always be like, red tea. And so that is kind of where I see red teas. There are aged red teas and things like that might not be as activating, but in general, red tea is going to be a more activating type of tea. Then we have oolongs. Oolongs can go either way. Sometimes their energy is so subtle and sweet and beautiful, and they're actually a really nice morning tea because they might not be as activating, or they're a little bit more gentle than the red teas. But then you have some like aged oolongs that are super deep and those can really mellow you out. So oolong is one of those that I would just recommend trying out and seeing how it makes you feel and then going from there. And again, every single tea is going to make you personally feel different. So again, you can try this out on your own and see. This is very general. And then green teas are, the least processed, so those are going to be also they can be quite activating as well. So again, I would say green tea is like a good morning tea. And if you're a matcha drinker, you're actually drinking the whole leaf. So it's like all blended up. And so that's going to be really activating because you're actually like drinking the whole plant, not just the steepings of it. Which is why matcha is activating. So those I would kind of stick to in the morning. Oh yeah, and on the oolong front, there is something called GABA oolong, which is processed in a way that it has GABA in it, which helps us sleep. So GABA oolong is a great option for nighttime. And I always like to play this game with my friends when we drink GABA at night, which is how many bowls can we stay awake for? And you kind of get into this place where you're like, the tea's so nice, I want to keep drinking it, and I'm like so tired. So GABA is a really great evening tea option. And then I want to talk about pu'ers. So pu'er is a type of fermented and aged tea. There's two different types, sho pu'er and sheng pu'er. Sho pu'er is aged artificially, which means it's kind of composted with heat maps and stuff before, so that the natural aging or the aging process happens immediately. And then sheng pu'er is just aged naturally, so it's just put into what we call a tea cake. So it's pressed into a tea cake, and then it just ages, and over time it ferments and becomes a lot darker. So sho pu'er is going to be dark right away, and sheng pu'er is going to take decades to get dark. And so sho pu'ers are really nice grounding teas, and aged shengs are really nice grounding teas. Over time, the caffeine levels go down in these aged teas, the theanine levels go up. They become, as I said, very grounding, very chill, and these you can have any time of day. I drink pu'er in the morning a lot because, again, I wake up with a ton of energy, and sometimes I'm like, girl, you need to ground it down. You have your morning practice to do, you have like stuff to just like chill out in. We don't need to spring out of bed and run a marathon. So pu'er is really nice and balancing for me in the morning. And then it's also really great in the evening. For me, I drink pu'ers all the time. And I will say though, pu'er has they have strong energies and they require a pot to brew. So because they come in cakes, they're not loose leaf. So if you are, for the most part, there are exceptions to that. But if you're starting out in your tea journey, you might not be starting out with this type of tea. And yeah, so sho pu'ers are great all the time. They're really also great in the winter because they're very warming. And then some of the lighter, more activating teas are great for summer, like green teas and oolongs. And then the sheng pu'er, this one's a little tricky because it's naturally aged. So at the beginning, if you're drinking a young sheng pu'er, it's going to be very activating compared to the old ones because it hasn't had that time to age and to change and for the energy to shift. I would say that for me, young sheng pu'ers are the most activating of any tea. I don't drink them very often. I always say that they remind me of young, teenage boys that are just running around, jumping off rooftops, breaking their bones, that. I didn't grow up in a family with boys. We're all women. And when I hear about that life sometimes, I'm just like, oh my God, what? And that kind of always is how I think of a young sheng pu'er. So they can be really activating. And then aged sheng pu'ers are really beautiful too and grounding. And this is nice because over time you get to really feel the difference. So if you have a sheng pu'er that's 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, you get to see what that aging process actually does to the tea. And yeah, those are kind of the main categories and different ways for us to think about, okay, what tea should I drink and how is it going to help balance me out? How can I use it as medicine? And then the last thing I want to say again is always seasonal, right? So we want to think seasonally too. I don't want to have this deep, dark, pu'er tea in the middle of summer when it's so hot and it's heating me up and everyone's in the tea ceremony wishing that they could take their t-shirt off. We can also use it to balance us within what's going on in nature. So I really love this time of the year because we're getting into kind of pu'er season or red teas. And, if you think about it, in winter, it's harder for me to wake up in the morning. So I might be drinking more red tea then, as opposed to in the summer when the sun's coming out at 5 a.m. and I'm struggling to sleep in the morning. So, if we think about that with nature too, it's like, okay, not just what's happening in my body, but how does that reflect what's happening outside in the world, and then what teas can balance that too. So a couple great resources if you are new to tea. Here are some teas that I recommend. Elevation is a really great red tea that is like honestly most people's first tea if you're drinking tea within my lineage. You can buy some from Global Tea Hut. You can also buy it from Living Tea. I also love Ruby Red. And again, these, yes, they're red teas, so they're more activating, but in general, they're not super activating. Any tea I'm recommending to you probably won't be that activating because, again, I don't drink teas that are that activating. And you can always put less tea in. You can always drink less tea to make it less strong. So Elevation and Ruby Red are available from both Global Tea Hut and Living Tea. Living Tea's local in the US. Global Tea Hut's going to come from Taiwan, so it might take longer and be a bit more expensive, but they have larger quantities. So if you're new and you're just trying something out and you want to see if you like it, I recommend Living Tea. So I really love those two. And then if you want to maybe like try an oolong or something, maybe I'd recommend like Iron Goddess of the Four Seasons for a nice intro to oolong, and you can try that out. And I also would really recommend Living Tea's Seasonal Tea Club. This might be a bit better if you're already using a teapot because not every tea can be brewed directly in a mug or a bowl. But you can also just save the other ones. But it comes with some really beautiful literature about the season and the teas that have been chosen. And it's a great you get 3 or 4 teas 4 times a year. So it's a great way to just try new teas and drink them along with the season that you're in. So I really love that offering. And I think that's another great way to try tea as medicine. So that is my spiel for today. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, leave them below. Shoot me a message on Instagram. And of course, if you are like, damn, this sounds amazing, I would love to have a practice like this in my life that's a little bit more formal, that helps me come into balance every morning before I even go out into the world. I feel you. I'm the same way. Love this practice. So if you feel like that, please reach out to me as well. You can schedule a little one-on-one below. Start Your Own Tea Practice starts again in 2 weeks. So calling you in. I hope you join us, and I hope that you take this opportunity to invite a beautiful medicine into your life that is going to help you get through these chaotic times. All right, sending you all so much love. And I will see you in a couple days for the next video.